When my granddaughter Chloe announced to her Sweet 16 party guests, Grandma makes everyone uncomfortable and she's embarrassing. She should leave. I smiled softly, gathered my purse, and quietly walked out of the venue. The words hit me, but I didn't react immediately. What Chloe didn't realize was that I had just spent a staggering $12,000 to give her the perfect party she had dreamed of. But that's not where the real story begins. Let me take you back and tell you what really happened that night and how I made a decision that would change everything. On my drive home from the country club, I wasn't just disappointed, I was hurt. But more than anything, I was determined. Chloe's words kept ringing in my mind, but I knew I needed to respond with actions that would teach her an important lesson. As I sat there in my car, I reached for my phone and called my financial advisor. I told him it was time to make some changes that would teach Chloe just what it feels like when things are no longer handed to you. Because sometimes the best lesson you can give is to show someone what they're truly losing. My name is Ruth Williams, and I'm 74 years old. I live in Portland, Oregon. I've spent the past 6 years building something that no one in my family ever thought would come from a retired teacher. They thought I was simply stretching my modest pension to help them. What they didn't realize was that behind the scenes, I had been building a financial foundation that would support them all in ways they could never have imagined. It all started 7 years ago when my husband, Harold, passed away suddenly from a heart attack. We'd been married for 42 years, and his sudden death left me reeling. For months, I felt completely lost. There I was at 67, sitting in our small Portland apartment, left with his life insurance payout of $180,000 and a pension rollover of $60,000. I didn't know the first thing about investing, and all I could think about was how I would make this money last for the rest of my life. But little did I know, that was just the beginning of a much bigger journey. I spent that first year just trying to survive. Getting through each day without Harold felt impossible. I couldn't bring myself to focus on money or the future. The small savings we had were quickly depleting, and I watched as Harold's life insurance money sat in a basic checking account, earning next to nothing. But then something shifted. Maybe it was the teacher in me, or maybe it was Harold's voice in my head, reminding me that I'd always been good with numbers. Either way, I knew I had to do something more with this money than just let it sit there. I started reading books about investing, watching financial videos online late at night when I couldn't sleep, and even enrolled in an online course about the stock market at the local community college. I spent hours learning about different types of investments, the stock market, and how I could use my husband's legacy to create something lasting. The first year was terrifying. I was scared of losing Harold's money, but I was even more terrified of outliving it. So I made my first real investment. I put $50,000 into index funds and $30,000 into dividend stocks. At the time, I had no idea what would happen, but I took the leap. And to my surprise, that small investment began to grow. By the end of the first year, I had $300,000, $45,000 in gains I never expected. Around that time, my daughter Lisa called me crying. She had been divorced for 3 years, working in marketing and barely making ends meet. Chloe, my granddaughter, had just been accepted to Riverside Academy, an elite private school, but the tuition was a staggering $25,000 per year. "Mom, I don't know what to do. I can't afford this," Lisa sobbed over the phone. "Chloe is so excited, but there's no way I can make it work." I could feel the weight of her stress, and without hesitation, I reassured her. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll take care of it." Lisa was stunned. "Mom, you can't be serious. You can't spend all that money. Harold worked so hard for that money." But what Lisa didn't know was that my small stock portfolio was no longer shrinking, it was growing. It had grown so much faster than I ever expected. So I made the decision to cover Chloe's tuition. At that moment, I realized that I wasn't just living off the small savings we had left after Harold passed away. I was now living off the investment returns, money that I had worked hard for. It wasn't a sacrifice, it was a choice to help them because I could. I continued to help them little by little. A few hundred here for car insurance, a few hundred there for clothes for Chloe, and when she needed tutoring for school, I paid for that too. Lisa would thank me constantly, saying things like, "Mom, you're stretching your budget so much for us." But she never realized that I wasn't sacrificing my security at all. My portfolio was growing every year. By year 3, it had reached $380,000, and by year 6, it was at $650,000. I had managed to earn about $50,000 a year in investment returns, which was more than enough to cover the $31,000 I was spending annually to support their lifestyle. All the while, I kept living the same simple life. I lived in my small apartment, drove my 2015 Honda, and shopped at thrift stores, not because I had to, but because I chose to. I wanted to make sure every dollar was working to secure their future, not mine. Lisa and Chloe had no idea about the extent of my investments. They thought I was just a generous grandmother helping them out. Chloe, especially, had no idea that all her expensive clothes, her school tuition, her car, and even her extravagant Sweet 16 party were being funded by my investment portfolio. She thought I was just being a selfless grandmother making sacrifices. I didn't correct her. I wanted them to appreciate what they were receiving, not realize where it was coming from. But things began to change. I started noticing the little comments Chloe would make when we were together. "Grandma, why don't you dress nicer?" she'd ask. "My friend's grandma wears designer clothes. Why don't you drive a nicer car?" Chloe's new friends at Riverside Academy came from families with money, and it seemed like she was starting to believe that she deserved the same. I tried to brush it off. I was used to my simple lifestyle, and I didn't need to show off. But as Chloe's demands grew, so did the gap between what she expected and what I could give. When she asked for a $400 backpack just because her friends had one, I didn't hesitate. When she wanted a pair of $300 shoes, I bought them for her. And when she wanted to go on a $3,500 class trip to Europe, I made that happen too. Lisa would occasionally remind me, "Mom, you don't understand how competitive this school is. These kids notice everything. Chloe needs these things to fit in." And so I continued to help. I co-signed for Chloe's car and paid the monthly payments of $250. But the more I helped, the more I realized how little they appreciated it. I wasn't being thanked for my support. I was being taken for granted. And the worst part was that Chloe seemed to be becoming more embarrassed by me every day. She started refusing my rides to school, saying she'd rather take the bus. She stopped inviting me to school events. And when I did show up, she gave me stiff, uncomfortable hugs and quickly moved away to join her friends. It was as if I no longer fit into the world she was building for herself. It all came to a head the day of her Sweet 16 party. I had put my heart and soul into making it perfect for her. It was the kind of party I thought she deserved, one where she could feel proud of her achievements and enjoy the fruits of my labor. But when I arrived at the country club that night, I could feel the judgment in the air. The other grandparents were dressed in designer outfits and driving luxury cars. I, in my simple dress and modest car, felt out of place. When I approached Chloe to wish her a happy birthday, she barely acknowledged me. She quickly turned back to her friends, and I could see the discomfort in her eyes. That should have been my first warning. But the moment that truly shattered my heart came a little later in the evening. I walked over to Chloe and her friends, hoping for a moment of connection. I asked, "Are you having a good time? Is everything okay?" Chloe's face froze. She looked around at her friends, then back at me. The panic in her eyes was unmistakable. She glanced from me to her friends, as if calculating the social cost of having me there, and then she said, "Grandma, you're making everyone uncomfortable. You should leave." The words felt like a slap to the face. This was the granddaughter I had been supporting for years, the one whose education, car, clothes, and social life were all made possible because of me. She was telling me to leave the very party I had paid for. I was devastated, but I didn't show it. I stood up straighter, took a deep breath, and replied, "Of course, sweetheart. I hope you enjoy your party." I turned and walked away, feeling the eyes of everyone in the room on me. As I walked to my car, I could hear the party resuming behind me, as if nothing had happened. The music played, the laughter continued, but inside I knew everything had changed. That night, I sat in my car and reflected on everything. I realized that I had been buying Chloe's love with my money. I had been trying to buy her acceptance, trying to buy my place in her life. But in doing so, I had forgotten the most important lesson of all. Respect and gratitude can't be bought. And so I made a decision. It was time to stop giving. It was time to stop enabling their sense of entitlement. I would no longer support them in the way I had. It was time to show Chloe and Lisa the true cost of the lifestyle they had grown accustomed to. The next day, I called my financial advisor and began making changes to my investments. No more contributions to Chloe's college fund, no more co-signing for her car, no more paying for her extravagant trips, and most importantly, I would no longer fund their lavish lifestyle. They needed to understand the difference between my choice to support them and their assumption that I would always be there to do so. The changes took effect immediately. Within a few days, Lisa was calling me frantic, asking why the payments she had been relying on had stopped. Chloe texted me asking for money, but I simply replied, "Ask your mother." For the first time, they were forced to face the reality of their situation without me. And it was hard for them, but it was a lesson that needed to be learned. As the weeks passed, I saw the change in them. Chloe got a job at a local coffee shop to help pay for her expenses. Lisa started asking me about investing, genuinely interested in how I had built my portfolio. Slowly, they began to understand. And I started living for myself. For the first time in years, I was able to spend money on myself without guilt. I bought myself new clothes, upgraded my car, and moved into a nicer apartment. I was living life on my own terms, and it felt liberating. Chloe's apology came months later, after a lot of growth. She was no longer the entitled, spoiled teenager who thought she deserved everything handed to her. She had learned what it meant to work for what you want. And when she gave me a bouquet of flowers for my birthday, flowers she bought with her own hard-earned money, it felt like the most meaningful gift I could ever receive. So that's my story. If there's one thing I want you to take away, it's this. You have more power than you think. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the lesson of self-reliance and respect. You don't have to continue giving to people who take you for granted. And if you've ever been made to feel like your love and generosity aren't enough, remember this. Dignity isn't something you can buy, and it's never too late to demand the respect you deserve. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had to set boundaries with family members who didn't appreciate your generosity. And make sure to subscribe for more stories like mine.